What if the most profound wisdom ever shared was condensed into just a few powerful sentences? You know, the kind of words someone might offer after a whole lifetime of deep understanding, right before they, well, left the world behind.
Last words really carry weight, don't they?
They really do. They're meant to cut straight to what truly matters. So today, we are embarking on a deep dive into a specific Dharma talk. This one was given way back in 1954 at Wat Phak Nam, and it zeroes in on what are presented as the Buddha's final words, his pacchimavācā. But it's not just about, reciting ancient phrases. It's about understanding a core principle he emphasized right at the very end. A principle that this source argues is, well, the absolute foundation of all goodness.
And that it leads the way not just to spiritual liberation, but also, perhaps surprisingly, to success in your everyday life. That's a key part of the argument here.
Exactly. So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack these teachings as they're laid out in this specific talk, to understand their significance as presented here and see how they connect, according to the source, to a path of, well, profound growth, both inner and outer.
And it's important context, I think, to understand that this talk comes from a tradition within Buddhism that really emphasizes deep internal practice, direct introspection.
Right.
So while the words themselves might sound familiar from other places, we'll be exploring their meaning and implications through that specific lens, focusing on the core message as it's detailed right here in the source material we're looking at.
Okay, let's jump right in then with those final words. As presented in this source, the Buddha's pacchimavācā is captured in this potent Pali phrase. Let's say it carefully. Handadani bhikkhave amantayami vo. Avayadama saṅkhārā appamādena sampadeta.
Yes. And the translation provided in the source for those words is, "O monks, I call upon you now. Formations are subject to decay. Strive with earnestness."
Formations are subject to decay. Strive with earnestness. 2 parts. Seems simple on the surface, but according to the source, incredibly profound and deeply connected. Let's break down that first part. Saṅkhārā.
Right, saṅkhārā. Like we can think of that as formations, or maybe compounds, basically, things that are put together, constructed.
Okay. And vayahama.
That means being subject to decay, to dissolution, to constant change.
So things put together fall apart.
In essence, yes. But what's really emphasized in this particular talk is the sheer universality of this. It's not just like a philosophical idea. The source insists this decay applies to absolutely everything in the universe we perceive.
Everything, not just, our bodies getting older.
No, not at all. Our physical bodies, yes, obviously they're decaying from birth onwards, constantly changing. But the source says it applies to literally anything that is formed.
So things we see, hear, touch.
Exactly. Anything seen, heard, known through any of the senses, or even things known just through the mind itself, any formation, any saṅkhārā is subject to this decay. And it's constant, it's irreversible, happening bit by bit all the time.
Wow.
And the talk even specifies that this applies across all realms of existence, described in Buddhist cosmology.
You mean like even beings in heavenly realms or formless realms? Is that what it's saying?
Yes, exactly that. The source explicitly mentions beings born from eggs, from moisture, from wombs, or those born spontaneously. And includes beings in the desire realms, the form realms, and even the formless realms.
So no exceptions.
None whatsoever, according to this interpretation. It states very clearly that all are formations, and therefore all are subject to this same process of decay vayadama. There's no formation, no compounded thing anywhere that escapes it. It's presented as just a fundamental reality of existence.
Okay. That's quite a perspective. From the tiniest particle to the biggest structure, everything's constantly dissolving. So bringing this back to you, the listener, why does constantly remembering this reality, this decay, actually matter in your life? What does the source say is the practical effect of holding on to this truth?
Well, the source outlines several really powerful effects. It fundamentally changes your perspective on things. For instance, it prevents what the talk calls heedless laughter.
Heedless laughter.
That's
an unusual phrase. What does that mean?
It implies a kind of carefree joy or mirth that comes from forgetting how transient things are, from being negligent of this reality. The source suggests that while you might still smile, a deep awareness of decay tempers that kind of, well, almost superficial happiness.
So it fosters a deeper, maybe more sober view?
More sober, perhaps, but ultimately more realistic. It grounds you.
That makes sense. If you're truly mindful that everything is constantly changing and dissolving, it's hard to be completely frivolous or, take things for granted.
Precisely. And this awareness of decay, It also directly fuels diligence and striving. It motivates you.
How so?
Well, if everything is changing and dissolving, there's a natural sense of urgency, isn't there? To make the most of the present moment, to cultivate what's wholesome, to get things done. The Source says it cuts right through laziness and idleness.
So it leads to success.
Yes, success in whatever you apply yourself to, whether that's learning something new, your work, or, of course, your spiritual practice.
So it's not some morbid focus meant to depress you. It's actually presented as an energizing truth. It highlights how precious and impermanent our time and opportunities really are.
That's exactly the argument being made here.
Yeah.
And it also makes you respectful. Crucially, it highlights the consequences of negative actions.
Because actions create results, and those are also formations subject to change and decay.
Exactly. If everything is changing, the results of your actions, good and bad, are also bound to manifest and change, potentially bringing decay and suffering later on. So this awareness fosters a kind of ethical mindfulness, a fear of unwholesome actions.
Okay, so just keeping this constant universal decay in mind isn't about dwelling on the negative. According to this source, it's actually a powerful engine for positive action, for ethical conduct, and for serious effort, both in the world and on a spiritual path. It sounds like a powerful antidote to apathy.
It's presented as exactly that. This awareness isn't optional for progress. It's the spark that ignites the necessary energy.
Which brings us very smoothly to the second part of those final words as presented in this talk. Appamāda sampadetta. Strive with earnestness. This is the core principle of appamāda. That's pacchimavācā, right? Translated here as earnestness or non-negligence.
Yes, appamāda. And the source uses a particularly striking analogy to convey just how important appamāda is. It compares it to the footprint of an elephant, the heedless.
The elephant's footprint, because it's the largest, the chief of all land animal footprints.
Yes, exactly that. The source explains the analogy. Just as all the footprints of other land animals can fit inside the huge print of an elephant, all wholesome qualities, kusala dhamma, have appamāda as their absolute root, appamāda. And they all converge upon appamāda samsaran.
Wow. So it's both the root and the culmination. It's not just one good quality among many. It's presented as the foundational principle, the one that all other good qualities depend on and, in a way, lead towards.
That's precisely the emphasis in this talk. Appamāda is positioned as the chief, the foremost principle. If you cultivate appamāda, all other virtuous qualities like generosity, patience, wisdom, they actually arise or are supported by it.
So how does the source define appamāda more specifically in this context? What does it mean to be earnest or non-negligent?
It's defined primarily as the direct opposite of pamāda. Pamāda is negligence, carelessness, heedlessness, being forgetful. So appamāda means to not forget, to not be careless, to keep the mind focused and alert.
Focused on what specifically?
And this is crucial. The source directly links it back to the first part of the final words. Appamāda means specifically not being negligent regarding the decay, the vayadhama we just discussed. It is a constant mindfulness of decay that is the cultivation of appamāda.
Okay. So the two halves of the final words aren't just listed next to each other. They're presented as, well, like cause and effect almost. Or maybe awareness and the necessary response. The awareness of universal decay fuels the imperative to strive with earnestness.
Absolutely interconnected. One arises from the other. And the source also gives some insight into what undermines appamāda, what leads to negligence, to pamāda.
And what does it say it causes that?
It mentions intoxication. It lists alcohol specifically, which is maybe obvious. But then it also talks about a more subtle kind of intoxication, a form of pride, or what it calls mana.
Pride, like arrogance being intoxicating.
Yes, according to this talk. A kind of haughty or self-satisfied state that makes one careless, heedless, disrespectful of the fundamental truths of reality, like decay. It even likens it to a male elephant in lust, powerful, but potentially dangerously out of control because of this internal intoxication.
That's a strong image.
It is. And this kind of mana, this prideful heedlessness, leads directly to forgetting, to pamāda. So overcoming pride, cultivating humility, is actually part of cultivating earnestness.
That's a fascinating connection, identifying pride itself as a root cause of the very negligence that holds us back. Okay, so we have this foundational reality, universal decay. Then the essential principle, earnestness or non-negligence, fueled by that awareness. If we commit to this appamāda, this striving with earnestness, where does the source say this path actually leads us? What's the goal?
The talk outlines the path forward as the path trodden by all Buddhas and Arahants, the enlightened ones. And it's described in terms of what's called the higher training. adhicitta, adhicitta, and adhipaññā.
Okay, adhisīla. That's isikonapen. Adhisikta is antidakant. And adhipaññā is adhistate. And adhipaññā is that higher training in morality, concentration, and wisdom. These are, familiar concepts in Buddhism generally. But this source seems to present a very specific, very internal interpretation of what achieving these trainings means, doesn't it?
Yes, this is where this particular talk offers a quite distinctive perspective. It describes the achievement or the realization of these higher trainings, not just as external practices or mental states, but as the direct internal experience of finding and seeing bright, clear spheres within oneself.
Spheres, like actual visual experiences.
That's how it's described here, yes. So adhisīla, according to the source, isn't just about maintaining pure external conduct or even having pure intentions. It's described as reaching and seeing a clear, bright sphere, like the sun or moon, located specifically in the center of what the talk calls the Dhamma sphere that makes the human body. That's Tenam Hajapen Kashmanut. Seeing that internal sphere is the realization of adhisīla. Then adhicitta isn't just about achieving external states of calm or samadhi through concentration techniques. It's described as progressing further inward, finding and seeing another bright sphere located precisely inside that first adhisīla sphere. And adhipaññā isn't simply about intellectual cleverness or having a lot of conceptual knowledge. It's the attainment and seeing of an even clearer, pure sphere situated right inside the adhicitta sphere.
So the actual spiritual progress in this view is marked by discovering and sort of traversing these internal luminous spheres.
Yes. The source strongly emphasizes that reaching and seeing these internal spheres constitutes the true realization of adhisīla, adhicitta, and adhipaññā. It even links this internal journey directly to the major divisions of the Buddhist scriptures.
Oh, so?
It states that achieving the internal adhisīla sphere means you've reached the root, the essence of the Vinaya, the text on monastic discipline. Finding the adhicitta sphere means you've reached the root of the sutta, the discourses. And seeing the adhipaññā sphere means you've reached the root of the abhidhamma, the higher philosophical texts. The external study points towards this internal realization.
That gives a completely different way of looking at those scriptures, like they're maps pointing towards an internal landscape you have to discover yourself. And the source conveys a real sense of urgency about starting this internal journey.
Oh, definitely. You use a powerful analogy. Not finding these internal states, not making progress on this path of internal discovery is likened to having a fire burning on your head.
A fire on your head.
Yes. The implication is crystal clear. Just as you would drop absolutely everything and strive with the utmost urgency to put out a literal fire on your head, you must apply that same intensity, that same earnestness, appamāda, to find these internal spheres and progress on the path. The danger of delaying is presented as immense.
That fire on your head image, it really drives home the need for immediate earnest striving, all powered by that initial awareness of decay. Okay, so this earnestness, fueled by constantly remembering things are falling apart, drives the search for these internal states of higher training. Adhisīla, adhicitta, adhipaññā. What's the ultimate destination? What's the final benefit of successfully following this path, according to the source?
Well, achieving these internal states is described as the essential means to experience in Dhammakaya.
Yeah.
That's often translated as the body of Dhamma, which is a very central concept in this particular tradition's teachings. Progressing through finding these spheres allows one to traverse the classical stages of spiritual attainment, becoming a Sotapanna, a Sakadagami, an Anagami, and ultimately an Arahant. And those stages are defined by cutting off defilements, right?
Exactly. Stages defined by the progressive cutting off of the mental defilements that bind us to suffering.
And the final culmination of that whole journey, the ultimate goal.
The ultimate goal is presented as escaping the entire cycle of existence. This means getting out of the loop.
The Lukava.
It encompasses what's called the three cycles: the travado, the cycle of karma, actions, the cycle of vipaka, results, and the cycle of kilesa, defilements, that fuel the whole thing. Escaping via saṅkhārā means liberation from rebirth in the three realms of existence: the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm.
And the destination.
The destination, the ultimate state, is Nirvana. It's described in the source, as you'd expect, as something incredibly profound, not easily attained. The complete cessation of suffering, the end of the cycle.
So, escaping the endless round of suffering and rebirth by cutting off defilements through this specific path of internal attainment, finally reaching Nibbana, that's the ultimate spiritual goal. But earlier you mentioned worldly benefits too. How does that fit in again?
Yes, and this is a really key point in this source talk. It explicitly states that maintaining appamāda, that is, remembering decay and striving with earnestness, leads to both spiritual liberation and worldly prosperity.
Both. How does it make that connection?
The source argues that the quality of earnestness itself, born from a realistic view of impermanence, is the very quality that makes a person diligent, focused, and ethical in any endeavor they undertake.
Oh, I see. So whether you're meditating, trying to find internal spheres, or you're studying texts, or you're, I don't know, farming, running a business, working in government, that same core principle of non-negligent, earnest striving is what leads to success and helps you avoid the pitfalls of carelessness or unethical behavior, because you understand the consequences in this world of constant change.
Exactly. The person who truly internalizes the message of saṅkhārā and lives with appamāda is, according to the source, the person who applies themselves fully, who achieves results, and who avoids actions that lead to future suffering, whether that suffering is worldly hardship or continued rebirth in the cycle. It's presented as a really integrated path where spiritual diligence directly informs and actually enhances your effectiveness in the world.
That's a remarkably practical take on such a profound spiritual teaching. It connects the highest aspiration, Nirvana, with the immediate reality of living a successful, ethical life right here and now. Okay, let's try to boil this down then. The core message of this deep dive, based on this 1954 talk about the Buddha's final words. We started with that powerful truth. Formations are subject to decay, via saṅkhārā. And according to this source, this isn't just your body getting older, it's universal. It applies to everything formed. Holding this truth in mind transforms your perspective. It acts as a potent antidote to heedlessness and becomes the fuel for purposeful effort.
Right. And that awareness of decay directly gives rise to the second key principle, striving with earnestness, appamāda. It's presented using that elephant's footprint analogy encompassing all others. Appamāda is the root and the culmination of all wholesome qualities, defined as non-negligence, specifically concerning the reality of decay. And it stands against carelessness born of intoxication, whether from substances or from pride.
And this appamāda, this earnest striving fueled by knowing things are impermanent, is the engine. It drives the path of higher training, adhisīla, adhicitta, adhipaññā, and crucially, this talk emphasizes these as the attainment of specific, bright, internal spheres. An inner journey that's seen as the true root of the scriptures and an urgent task, like putting out a fire on your head.
And ultimately, this whole integrated teaching shows the path to experiencing the Dhammakaya, Kaseshatim, progressing through the spiritual stages by cutting off defilements and achieving that final goal of liberation from the cycle of suffering and rebirth, reaching Nirvana. And very significantly, the source insists that this exact same principle of earnestness, rooted in reality, simultaneously leads to effective, successful, and ethical engagement in the world around us.
It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? If constantly remembering that everything you perceive, including yourself, is in this state of subtle, irreversible decay, if that truly changes your perspective and drives you to be diligent, focused, purposeful to cultivate appamāda, what small, deliberate thing could you maybe start doing today? How could you integrate this awareness of change, even just a little, to cultivate earnestness in one specific area of your own life? Whether that's related to a goal you have, a habit you want to change, or just your own inner state. Something to mull over as you go about your day.